right? It's recording. So, what's up, guys? It's your boy Steve on the NDO Podcast. Today, I have my guy Tommy Clark, who's a nutritionist, also a former collegiate basketball player. Helping basketball players and people change their lives through nutrition. And but yeah, we're gonna get his story. But how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. I appreciate you having me on the show. I know it's been a while. We connected several months back and things just got crazy, but I'm glad we were able to circle back and make this happen. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, no doubt, and I appreciate you making the time to be on here. So for you guys that don't know, we're gonna basically get to his story. But yeah, we originally connected way back in like October,
Yeah.
set something up in terms of talking, and it's just like like I said, I was literally scrolling through our text. I'm like, man, we were just going back and forth to school, and then I had training. I was like, that was a really busy time for both of us. So it's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Doing a full circle. But the thing is too, like the one thing that I want to just, say you're doing a really good job is the content you're putting out. And so I've been watching it and kind of trying to implement what you put out into my regimen in terms of nutrition and, well-being and things like that. So, thank you for that.
Yeah, of course. No, I appreciate that. I'm glad the content helps. I try to put out as much free content as I can because I know a lot of people are watching, and as we'll get into in a few minutes, I'm sure a lot of basketball players don't realize, and trainers and coaches for that matter, don't realize how important nutrition is. So hopefully someone sees my content and goes ahead and actually takes action on it. So I'm glad it's helped.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, like I say, like on the podcast, if one person, you affect one person's life, that's what really matters, So let's get into the basketball side. Let's get a little bit of background on you, where you came from, and when did your love for basketball really, start, and then where it led to?
Yes, the funny thing is, through elementary school, I hated basketball, man. Like at recess during elementary school, I was trash. I was terrible, and no one ever passed me the ball. So I started off with this like dislike for the game, and then I don't know what happened. I was also playing baseball. I wasn't very good at baseball either, and I think I got sick of baseball. So I started playing basketball a little bit more seriously, but still not that serious. In sixth grade was when it really like clicked. I was like, oh, this is fun. And then the summer between 7th and 8th grade is when I really like went all in. And from then on out, basketball was the only sport I played. Whether or not specializing that early was good or bad, we could talk about that all day long. But that's when I really got serious about it. And then through high school, played, and then ultimately was able to play at the D3 level for a little bit. I'll rewind for a second there. Like in high school, I started off my sophomore year. I was on varsity, but I was riding the bench the entire year, and that's when like the importance of following a scheduled training program really kicked in. At that point, nutrition still wasn't even in the picture. That's when it kind of clicked as like, okay, I got to follow a game plan when it comes to training. Spent all that off season working with the trainer. In junior year, got into the starting lineup, and then ultimately worked my way to be able to get the opportunity to play in college. So going from riding the bench to getting the opportunity to play in college, nutrition hadn't entered the picture yet. This was all just training and hard work in the gym. But when I got to college, it was kind of like, damn, I'm not athletic at all to keep up with these guys. And people think, oh, D3 is not that crazy. There's some athletes at the D3 level. It's a whole different level, no matter where you're coming from, high school varsity to college, regardless of level, it's a big jump. So when I made that jump, it was a pretty big wake-up call. And at that point, I was just kind of lost, because up until that point, I'd been working super hard in the gym for as long as I could remember, in the gym 6 days a week, 2 times a day, most days, and started watching film, was watching all sorts of instructional YouTube videos, like literally everything you could possibly do to get better as a basketball player. I felt like I was already doing. So when I got to college, it was very much a weird situation, because I just felt stuck and I didn't really know where to turn next. And then by some stroke of luck, I was looking through this basketball forum online, and someone made a random post about nutrition. I was like, oh, damn, I haven't even paid attention to that before. And that kind of got the wheel spinning there. The funny thing is, with that, I did probably the worst thing I've done with my diet, which was cut out carbs and like go on a low carb diet in the middle of my freshman basketball, like in the middle of my season. So my performance ultimately like just went to crap at first. And then luckily I started to piece things together. I was still super interested in the topic. So started to still do more research and slowly started to understand, oh wait, carbs are important. Carbs give you energy. I probably shouldn't cut those out. I started to piece together a proper nutrition plan. And that's kind of what got my love for nutrition going through the game of basketball. By now I just blew through like, what was it? Like almost a decade there in 5 minutes. So hopefully they answered the question.
Yo, well, that was a interesting, story in terms of like your progression.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize that progression only takes place when you're self-aware, right? If you understand where you are with yourself and can be honest about it, then you can start taking strides if you really want to take that next step, and obviously you realize that, and that's really important. But now let's go into, when did you kind of feel that nutrition was kind of like something that you wanted to do moving forward? Was it because of that you were like, oh, this is really interesting, and it started to grow into a passion to sync it with basketball? Like, what explain that transition?
Yeah, so I think at first when I like I said, when I first came across that forum post, that got me super interested in it. And at the time, the information that I was learning and applying wasn't quite the correct information looking back on it, but I was still really interested in it. It was really fascinating. I was like, oh, this is so cool. And thankfully, some people never figured this out, but thankfully I started to piece together how to do it like in an evidence-based, like science-based way, and actually do it in a way that made sense based on the activity I was doing. And then from there, once I started to actually see positive results on the court, it was kind of just off and running. And then I would help out my friends. My first quote unquote client was my friend from high school. He started off at 280 pounds. We got him down to like 215. And that was kind of a really cool moment for me. And it also reinforced the idea of, oh, I'm actually pretty good at this whole coaching thing. Let me take this a little bit more seriously. So I think it was a combination of my own passion for it and how I applied it to my own game, and seeing how much it impacted my ability to perform on the court. And then also the experience at first working with a handful of clients, helping them get results. And it was like the passion combined with the realization that I was relatively skilled in this sort of craft that propelled me to then kind of dive deeper into it. And eventually got to a point actually where during my preseason of my sophomore year in college, it got to a point where I'd already been officially certified as a coach, done a few certifications at that point, and had been working with some clients and was doing the whole social media content, all that game. And it was just taking up a ton of time between the business, basketball, school. And it had gotten to a point where I was so much more interested in the nutrition side of things and actually coaching people than I was actually being at practice and playing basketball. So at that point, I made the decision to walk away from basketball and go all in on the coaching side of things.
No, but that's important though. Like, that's once again being self-aware, that you understand that your passion, being passionate about something, knowing you're skilled and good at something, and you combine the two, is a deadly combination. And it leads to you at the end of the day doing what you love, and you're happy. And like you said, that realization when you help your friend lose that weight, it's just like, that's like a eureka moment. You're like, oh, I like it's like, so that's really, really cool. And like, I mean, I had something similar. I would train. So playing basketball. I mean, the people who listen to the podcast know I walked on at a Division I school, earned a scholarship. But during summers, I would train kids to make extra cash. And it was just something that they kept coming back to me, and they thought it was fun, and they saw improvement. And it was just something I didn't think about at the time, but it was something that was playing in the back of my head. And then when I finished playing, I'm like, I think I could kind of do this. I still had the hoop dreams, playing professionally, but I was working and playing and training, sorry. And now, like, it kind of led to me coaching, and then boom, now I'm all in on training. So definitely can relate to how you feel about that. So now, let's talk some nutrition here, just because I mean, to what you're saying, like, I did my own research. Like, I graduated high school in 2011.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
Me trying to figure out one of my things was like, obviously everybody's body is different, but like I was trying to put on weight and I was trying to eat. I think I was doing it the right way. It just, I didn't get the results I wanted. And then when I got to college, I just ate whatever because I'm always working out. And you put on. I didn't lose the body fat that I wanted because they have to be at elite level for the Division I stuff. But anyway, long story short, what is the, I guess, the correlation per se? What is like a average meal supposed to look like? Or we can really get in depth with all this stuff. So just let's go over the basics.
Yeah. So in terms of what a meal is going to look like, the components of the meal stay pretty constant. It's just the portion sizes that depend, and that's going to depend on activity level and a bunch of different stuff. So if an athlete isn't tracking their macros and actually inputting all the stuff into MyFitnessPal, which I don't usually have people start off with, eventually we progress there, and we can go over how I like to progress athletes from ground zero to everything dialed in. But when they're not doing that yet, I like to recommend that every athlete gets a protein source, a carbohydrate, and some sort of color in with every meal. So the protein is going to help, obviously, with muscle growth, muscle recovery, give you the amino acids that you need to support all that, along with a number of other processes. And the carbohydrates, arguably the most important of the meal, the most important component of the meal, is going to help you actually fuel your activity. And carbohydrates are demonized so much. So carbs make you fat, carbs are this, carbs are that, when in reality, they're your fuel for training. And if you don't eat enough of them, you're not going to have enough fuel. So you got to make sure you get those in. And then color, whether it be fruit or vegetables, are going to supply you with all sorts of vitamins, minerals, antioxidants that are needed for a bunch of critical reactions in your body to keep you healthy, manage inflammation, all that sorts of stuff. So usually the very first place I'll have someone start is not even with that, honestly. I'll just have them start with eating 3 to 5 meals per day, period. Like, I don't even care what you're eating at those meals, just eating 3 to 5 meals per day. The reason being is that I could probably count on one hand the amount of basketball players I've met and worked with that have actually been eating enough food from the start. Most of the time, they're way under eating. And then when you dig deeper, I'll ask them, how many meals are you eating? Oh, 1 meal a day, 2 meals a day. That's most likely not going to be enough to meet your calorie needs. So what's a really simple thing we could do that doesn't even require you to change your diet, really? Just add in one more meal. You can eat the exact same 2 other meals, the exact same 1 other meal, but just add in a meal or 2 to get you up to 3 meals a day, 4 meals a day, 5 meals a day. And what does that do? It takes you from that low calorie intake to a higher calorie intake. And that alone, you'll be better fueled. You'll be able to see improvements on the court, in the gym, pretty quickly, even within the span of a couple of days, or especially a couple of weeks of consistently doing that. And it requires very little change. And then from there, when they got that down, I like to focus on hydration pretty early on too, because that's a really simple thing that you can fix. But once you got that dialed in, then we'll progress to, okay, are you getting a protein, a carb, and a source of color in with every meal? And that's like that next level. And then from there, maybe start tracking your calorie intake a little bit, and then so on and so forth. We kind of you can get as complicated and complex as you want with nutrition, but it really doesn't have to be all that complex. Those simple things early on get you a ton of results right away.
Wow, that was a decent amount, but I mean, that's kind of constant. I mean, those are the things that I knew, like, in terms of, even like you said, so like, it wasn't as big in terms of nutrition. Literally, I go back to my college now, and like the year after I leave, I find out they finally put like a snack bar in the weight room after they work out. I'm like,
Yeah.
now we care about nutrition. Like, and that was only 2016. So it's not even been 5 years since they started really focusing on the nutrition side. And that's a mid, I guess, like a lower mid-major Division I school. So, you know, so it's still pretty new in terms of just caring. Even everyone knows, like, athletes there has to be like a certain amount of food, but in terms of just caring about your athletes and making sure they're okay, they're kind of like educating the athletes, but not to the knowledge that, per se, like someone as yourself would have.
Yeah, on that subject, on that topic, it's definitely important that more and more schools and more programs, even professional teams, they put more resources into nutrition. But a way to spin that positively, though, is not very many players are paying attention to it right now. So if you actually do, and even just do that, like super basic stuff, even if you just literally eat 3 meals a day, 4 meals a day, and maybe follow that meal structure that laid out, the protein, carbs, and the color. If you literally just do that, you'll be better off than like 99% of the basketball players out there. And because so few players and so few programs put a major emphasis on it and very little people actually implement this stuff, if you can be one of the few that does implement it, it can give you a real competitive advantage. Because eventually more and more people catch on. It's starting to become more of a topic, and it's starting to become, quote unquote, like cooler to talk about nutrition and actually eat right. But still, even at the NBA level, I interviewed the Lakers' former strength and conditioning coach on my podcast a few weeks back. And he was saying how a couple of the rookies, didn't name names, but a couple of the rookies during the time he was there ordered chicken tenders and fries to the locker room pre-game. So guys at the highest level, like in the league, are still following questionable eating habits. So if you can even just dial it in a little bit, it can give you a really, really unique advantage.
That's crazy. I mean, the other podcast that I listened to that they sort of touched on it was PJF, Performance. And so he was saying the same thing, like they don't eat well because they're traveling a lot. But that's the only reason why I asked, is because, you know, I honestly, I was going to ask you, literally my follow-up question right now is going to be like, first off, how early do you think a kid or a player, I was going to say kid, but how early a player should kind of like, what is your opinion? I know everyone's going to say something different.
Yeah.
What do you think about nutrition at an earlier age? So, example, let's say like 8th grade, so the end of middle school. Would that be ideal, or should you wait?
Yeah.
Well, like, and you brought this up too, like the sport specification or specialization.
Yeah.
People are training kids from 4 years old now to be an NBA player, which is stupid. But anyway,
for sure.
Yeah, but so what is your opinion about that?
Yeah, so I mean, the interesting thing is, I mean, nutrition matters before you're even born, like what your mom eats when you're in the womb. So it definitely matters at an early age. I think the important thing is obviously you want to develop a child's like relationship with food in a positive way. So I definitely wouldn't talk to a middle school or elementary school kid talking about getting 6-pack abs and like dieting down and get shredded. And for most hoopers at any level, you don't really need to do that. But nonetheless, for kids, it's important to like build a positive relationship with food. And really, when I work with relatively younger athletes, whether it be middle school going into high school, a lot of my focus with them is definitely less pay attention to nutrition, but pay attention to it more in the sense of how is it going to fuel your performance? How is it going to make you feel better? How is it going to keep you healthy? Not so much from a perspective of, oh, you need to lose weight or, oh, you need to lose body fat. Because then that kind of, one, is counterproductive to being a good basketball player, because the approach, like being in a calorie deficit, is one of the worst things you could do for your overall performance in the short term. but also it kind of fosters that positive relationship with food. So that's like the trickiest thing working with kids is you have to be really careful about how you communicate things. And at a younger age, a lot of it is on the parents, to be completely honest. Like in high school, the kids can take a little bit more responsibility, start maybe cooking for themselves, helping out with grocery shopping and stuff like that. But in middle school and elementary school, a lot of that's on the parents. Like if you start feeding your kids healthier foods that they enjoy, of course, don't force feed them stuff. But if you start that from a younger age, it's going to set them up for success later on. So I don't think there's anything wrong at all with making nutrition a priority. I just think there's a difference between nutrition and dieting. Dieting would be like, oh, you have to lose fat, or you have to do this, you have to do that, and it makes it just a very negative experience. But focusing on how it's going to help them feel better and perform better, all that stuff, I think as early as you can.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. So I forgot, what's the other term I'm thinking of? So like in terms of just change, I guess what would you say is a better term for dieting?
I mean, honestly, it's an interesting conversation. Some people are a little bit more nitpicky about words than others. I think it depends on who you're talking to. Like if you're talking to someone who has a previous history of eating disorders, then obviously you got to be a little bit more careful how you communicate things. I don't think there's anything wrong with the word dieting, or like saying, oh, I'm going to try this diet, or I'm going to watch my diet. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with it. It's all just context. Like some people you got to be a little bit more careful of just because of like their personality, or maybe they have a history with eating disorders and stuff like that. But I think spending a lot of time arguing over the nuances in a specific word is kind of just missing the entire point. Yeah. I think there's some importance to it. Obviously, like you shouldn't like tell your kid like you're going to go on a diet. You want to be careful to communicate that correctly because they're so malleable at a young age. Like you can kind of really form how they think. But overall, I think spending a lot of time, which you'd be surprised, a lot of people do spend a lot of time arguing over like this word or that word, or how do you communicate this topic? And it's important, but I think overall just getting the concepts across in a positive way for this specific individual is the most important thing.
Yeah, that was the thing, because I've like heard about like people argue like, oh, diet's not a great term because it, you're changing for a short amount of time, or or whatever. Okay, so now I want to ask some of these tough questions. What are your thoughts about these so-called diets? So, you got, vegan, pescatarian, like things like that. As a nutritionist, have you worked with athletes who you had to cater to that, and what do you see if you were to say I know you don't, obviously you don't have to say them, but like I had this athlete who's a vegetarian compared to this athlete who eats balanced, to this athlete who doesn't eat meat but sticks to like fish and things like pescatarian and things like that.
Yeah, so when it comes to all those different types of diets, the most important thing is what does the athlete enjoy and what can the athlete actually stick to, because a lot of those different philosophies can be effective. It just matters, like, do you enjoy it and can you see yourself actually sticking to it? Because let's say, for example, and this is not true at all, but let's say a study came out that, or multiple studies, so it was like very conclusive in the research, came out that the vegan diet was the best diet, like hands down. It was, it's optimal for performance, but including meat didn't really affect it that much, but it was kind of like, there's a small difference there. So if you really want to maximize performance, you probably go vegan. And again, this is not true at all, just using it for the example's sake. Let's say that happened, but an athlete really enjoys meat, and meat is like a key component of like what they're having on a daily basis, and they really enjoy it and they don't really want to cut it out. Technically, in this situation, going vegan would be better for their performance, but if they can't actually stick to it, it's not going to work. You could think about it all day long and say, oh, this is great, but if you can't actually stick to it for a sustainable period of time, not just a week or two, it's not really a good approach for you. Now, back to just in general, all these different diets, whether it be vegan, vegetarian, paleo, keto, most if you're a basketball player, you really should not be going keto because that's just low carb. And like we're talking about, you need carbohydrates. I would not recommend that. But like, let's say, for example, a traditional like Mediterranean diet, just whole foods, generally overall healthy, versus a vegan diet. You can make both work. The thing with vegan diets, though, is that you run the risk of certain nutrient deficiencies, like vitamin B12, iron, omega-3s, things like that. So you have to take that into consideration. And most people who go vegan don't actually plan it out. They just go vegan because they saw it on a documentary. And they don't actually plan out all those things they need to take into consideration when it comes to nutrient deficiencies and also difficulty hitting your protein intake. Because the difficult thing about going vegan is that when you go plant-based, your protein needs actually go up. But it also becomes more difficult to eat more protein. So you're in the situation where your needs just went up, but you're having trouble getting enough protein as it is. So it's a really interesting situation, and it can work if you plan for it correctly. It just takes a lot more planning to be done correctly. So that's an example of if an athlete really wants to do that, maybe for religious reasons or for ethical reasons, because they don't believe in eating animals, and that's totally your decision. You can make it work. It just takes a lot more planning. But back to the overall question, my biggest thing is as long as you're getting a good balance of macronutrients and vitamins and minerals, it doesn't really matter what diet you're following. Honestly, you probably shouldn't even follow a diet. Just eat I guess the common sense diet would be like what you would call it, just a decent balance of macronutrients. Make sure you're getting enough proteins, carbs, fats, your vitamins, your minerals. If you check all those boxes, it really just comes down to what you enjoy and can actually stick to.
Yeah, that sounds like, the reason why I brought that up, like you said, like I totally like dropped the ball. I meant to ask about plant-based and things like that. And, but it's just crazy to put things in perspective like that. Obviously I've done a little bit of research, but like your field. So it's just like, I'm learning a lot as you're talking. And just because I know with the athletes I work with, I ask them like, are you guys eating well? How's your diet? And how's things?
Yeah.
Because sometimes and then the other thing is like the sleep deprivation aspect, especially with teenagers. And I had a workout on this past Saturday, and like I was literally 30 minutes into the workout, and these guys are like hands on their knees.
Yeah.
Like, dude, you just kind of started. Like, what's going on with you guys?
Yeah.
Like, how many hours did you sleep last night? I think they were lying to me. They're like 7-8 hours. Like, you guys are eating well? They're like, yeah. I'm like, hey, if you guys have been working out during this whole quarantine, like, you shouldn't be this tired already. So,
yeah.
So to that point, so what is I know sleep is very important. Is that involved with your plan? You froze for a second.
You got out there for a couple seconds.
Oh, okay. So yeah, no. So I asked.
You're saying sleep?
Yeah. So do you advise in terms of this sleep play a huge part in your nutrition plan?
Yeah, absolutely. It has to, because it doesn't matter what training you're doing. It doesn't matter what your diet looks like or what your nutrition looks like. If you're not getting enough sleep and you're not getting good quality sleep, neither of those two things are going to be maximized. Like, you're not going to maximize the results you get from your training, from your nutrition. None of that if you're sleeping like crap. And a lot of times there are some like nutritional things that can actually impact sleep. So that also plays into it. But overall, sleep is crazy important. There was a study done in like 2011, I believe it was, on Stanford basketball players. And they went from sleeping 6 hours on average, which isn't crazy low. It's not great, but it's not super, super low. It's like on the lower side of like what would be tolerable, to about 8 hours on average, which is kind of like the golden like sweet spot for you. And they found that their 3-point percentage when they tested them went up by 9.2%. Their free throw percentage also went up. And anyone around basketball knows that 9.2% is a pretty significant increase from 3. So I think it just goes to show, and there's been I can't cite any off the top of my head specifically, but there has been tons of research displaying the benefits of sleep and the importance of it and the negatives of not getting enough sleep. Like if you don't get enough sleep, you're going to deal with more cravings. You typically crave more sugary foods, so it can be more difficult to keep your nutrition on point. Your cognitive function obviously is impacted, and all those sorts of things. Immune system function goes down, so you're at a higher risk for illness and injuries. So a bunch of really, really great positives when it's on point, and a bunch of really, really bad negatives when your sleep sucks. So it's one of those things that you have to pay attention to. And if you're not, you're really leaving a lot of progress on the table.
See, man, that's huge. Like I mean, like I said, like all my stuff that I've learned has been like self-taught, listening to podcasts, doing my own research. I'm not certified with anything. I just want to like bringing someone like you onto this, and then obviously having access to you, because like I mentioned in the text, I do want to work with you because I want to have somebody such with your stature and things like that and status to help my potential athletes and help them progress, because I mean there's a decent amount of kids that are like, I'm like, what are your goals and dreams? And like some are like saying, I just want to be the best player I can be. Others saying they want to go to college.
Yeah.
Others that want to be professionals. So, and I'm just saying, like, hey, nutrition's a big part, sleep's a big part, all that stuff. So
yeah. It's on that note though, it's one of those things where like, if you're not a genetic freak, you have to be paying attention to it if you want any shot. I mean, college, like I said, I was able to get to the college level just through hard work in the gym. I think in the grand scheme of things, I didn't eat that bad in high school, so I think nutrition was kind of okay. But if you want any shot at playing at the professional level and you're not like a freak, you gotta have your nutrition at least a little dialed in, and like the sleep and all those little things that aren't actually so little is crazy important, especially when you're not in that situation where you have that raw, like natural athletic ability.
Yeah, no, and you make a huge point. I wasn't the most athletic, but I was one of the hardest workers. But like you said, I did try to pay attention to the food that I ate. Even I would, you know, here's a question that just popped up in my head. I have another question that I do want to get to.
For sure.
What do you think about having like cheat days? What's your view on that?
Yeah, so I mean, in my opinion, if you're following a nutrition plan that actually is made for you, you really shouldn't need one. Like, you feel free to have ice cream on a Monday night just because you want ice cream on a Monday night. I think it's all about empowering the athlete to make decisions that are in their best interest. So if they're in the middle of their off season and they don't have really any important games coming up and they feel like having ice cream, or they feel like having some pizza, they feel like having a cookie, like, have it. It's fine. Just be aware of the consequences of it. Like, if having pizza makes you feel like crap, then maybe don't have pizza as often. And I think allowing athletes to connect those dots and just make the decision for themselves. And if they actually just want to have a slice of pizza because that's their thing and they enjoy it, cool, enjoy it in moderation. So my opinion on that is, really, if you're following a nutrition plan that's actually like genuinely made for you and something that is right for you, you shouldn't really feel like you need a cheat day. Now, with that being said, that doesn't mean go eat pizza, ice cream, and cookies every single day, every single meal. That's probably not in your best interest. But knowing that you have the freedom to kind of include those really whenever you want, just as long as you're okay with the consequences, I think that's my view on the whole cheat meal thing. Because when you kind of assign it that title of a cheat meal, it suddenly becomes a lot more special. Whereas if it's just kind of not an everyday thing, but if it's just kind of like a normal thing, it's suddenly not as important, and you're not like spending all this time looking forward to your cheat meal. And it doesn't usually lead that sort of crazy overeating that usually happens when you have a cheat day. Cheat meals too, but especially when it turns into a cheat day, that's when things can get pretty ugly. So I think just include your favorite foods in moderation. Obviously, if you know something is going to not make you feel good, like I know for me personally, dairy, not really good for me in terms of just how I feel. So that doesn't mean don't have dairy. It's actually super healthy if you aren't lactose intolerant, but I am. So I know the night before an important, what I'm doing now, presentation, or when I was playing the night before a game, probably not going to have dairy because it's just not going to make me feel good. Whereas if I don't have anything important coming up, maybe just want to have some ice cream because I feel like having some ice cream and I'm okay with kind of feeling a little bit off that night and the next day, then cool. There's nothing wrong with it. You just make an informed decision. But I know a little long-winded answer there, but hopefully that makes sense.
No, that does. You brought up a great point. When I tell myself like I eat good and then I say I have a cheat day. I eat really bad for that day, and I feel like
yeah. Yeah, because then you eat like that, and then it gets to a point where you're like, you don't even feel good. Because if you do it in moderation, you're not gonna, unless you, again, like if you're lactose intolerant and you just say screw it and have some ice cream, good luck. But if it's not even that sort of case, and you just feel like having some ice cream or cookies or pizza or whatever your kind of favorite food is, if you do it in moderation, it really shouldn't make you feel that bad. Whereas if you go full out like cheat day mode, yeah, you're gonna feel it for the next day, 2 days, 3 days. It's tough for sure.
Yeah, that's funny because like you said, and when you said it, it triggered me. I was thinking like, you're right. You put a special title on it, so now you're looking forward to it. And now it's just like,
yeah,
I got to get through this. Oh, yes, today's the day. I can do all this stuff. So, no, yeah. I like that message about moderation. And that's really important for especially whoever's watches this and listens to this. It's just, balance with that and then make things a lot smoother, right?
Yeah.
Now, as an athlete, like we brought this up when we were just talking about the diets. Especially with someone like plant-based protein or plant-based or like vegan, having some deficiencies in some certain things, like certain vitamins, certain things your body needs. What are your views about certain supplements for athletes to take?
Yeah.
And, just go into that a little bit.
For sure. So supplementation is kind of like that top of the pyramid. Like if you look at it, I like to look at nutrition kind of like a pyramid. The bottom is like calories in versus calories out. That's the foundation. Like none of this works without that really. And then you got your macronutrients, which are proteins, carbs, and fats. You got your micronutrients, which are your vitamins and minerals. And then timing, which is like how are you timing your meals? What does your pre-workout meal look like? Post-workout meal? All that sort of stuff. And then above that, like the top of the pyramid, it's like super small, gets you a little bit of progress, but not really make or break, will be supplementation. And there are some supplements that most athletes would benefit from, but it's not going to be a make or break thing. And no supplement is going to determine whether or not you see results. And really, I like to say supplementation, unless an athlete comes to me like they've gotten blood work done and their doctor says they have a deficiency and they have them taking a certain supplement. And obviously, like the doctor told them to do that, that's totally fine. But I don't see the need like straight out the gate to just go crazy with supplementation. One, because it gets expensive real quick. And two, because a lot of them don't really do all that much. I would say in terms of some foundational ones that most athletes would benefit from, if you're someone who doesn't get outside much or lives in like a northern environment, especially during the winter, maybe vitamin D. Again, with that one, you'll probably want to get some blood work done and run that by that just to make sure you actually need it. But that's one potentially. A multivitamin. There's some debate over multivitamins, like whether or not you should take one. Some people say it's a waste of money. Some people say it's good. There's really no evidence I'm aware of that would make it implicated as like a bad thing. So at worst, it doesn't really do much. At best, it kind of serves as an insurance policy to make sure you're getting your vitamins and minerals in. It's kind of getting a baseline amount of all the ones that you need. And then another one that you could consider supplementing one's like fish oil, omega-3s. Most people don't get a ton of those, especially if you're not eating like salmon on a weekly basis and other fatty fish. If you're not getting a lot of that in, that could be something that potentially you go towards. One that for some reason people still debate, even though the research is pretty unanimous on it, is creatine. There has been a lot of research done on creatine. I think besides whey protein, which is another one we'll get into, the most researched sports performance supplement out there. And there's plenty of benefits: increased strength, power. Let's see. I think I'm missing one. There was also some research suggesting it had some neuroprotective benefits too, which is really interesting. That's more of a recent finding. But overall, creatine is one that I think most basketball players benefit from at least trying. Some people don't respond to it. Like, it's not a negative effect. They just don't see any benefit from it. And if that's the case for you, then just discontinue it. But overall, it's a very low risk, potentially pretty high reward in terms of performance enhancing benefits. The one thing is, like, if you do take it, you might experience some like initial weight gain, which is a good thing for some people. Some people don't really want that. So just be aware of that, but it's not inherently a bad thing. So I would say those are some pretty foundational ones. I feel like there's one that's on the tip of my tongue that I'm just like not recalling right now, but those are some that I would recommend if someone were to go down that route. But like I said at the beginning, don't feel like you have to take a certain supplement. If you take absolutely zero supplements and just eat an overall balanced diet, eat plenty of fruits and vegetables, that'll put you in a pretty good spot.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. You just cut out the end, so I didn't hear the end. But so now with the supplements, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's not supplements, but it's kind of like you just brought it up with the creatine aspect. Protein powder, protein shake.
Yeah.
Good, bad, based on, I guess, well, it's probably going to be based on your diet per se, right? And then what brands would you suggest that you may give to your clients, or just basically what to not take in terms of just for I guess high school athletes, because I think some high school kids, take protein shakes. I know I used to sometimes. And then obviously college and pro, where there's more restrictions on what they're allowed to put in their bodies, right? With NCAA rules, and then, professional league, right?
Yeah. So when it comes to protein powder, I think it can definitely be a helpful addition to your diet, especially if you're someone who struggles to get enough protein in on a daily basis. And for example, if someone is plant-based, in most cases, they're going to need some sort of protein powder and then to really help them hit their protein needs on a daily basis. But even if someone isn't plant-based, it can be a really helpful tool, especially if you notice that you're really under eating protein and for some reason your appetite's just not there. Getting something like protein powder in liquid form can be a great way to make that easier to reach your goal on a daily basis. Again, is it a must-have if you're hitting your protein intake on a regular basis? Not really, but for most athletes, I think it's helpful to include, and I find it helps them to hit the protein intake. Now, as far as the different types, so there's whey protein, and within whey protein, there's 3 different types. So there's whey concentrate, whey isolate, whey hydrolysate. Whey isolate is the one that you're going to want to look for. That's typically the highest quality one. And then in terms of plant-based proteins, there's a number of different types. Usually the best ones are some sort of blend, because plant-based proteins, many of them lack the full essential amino acid profile. They're missing 1 or 2 key amino acids. And by blending multiple different types together, so like, for example, brown rice and pea protein or something like that, you can kind of make up for that lack of a full profile of amino acids, and that'll just help make sure you're getting the benefit out of that protein powder. Now, as far as different types of brands, the biggest thing here, regardless of which brand you go with, is that you look for something that's third-party tested. So the one I like to look for is NSF, Certified for Sport. It's a little blue circle, has the letters NSF inside of it. That means that whatever is on the label is actually in the supplement, because you'd be surprised how many times supplement companies will say something is on the label or say, like, this is the ingredients, and then they don't actually match up with what is inside that supplement. In many cases, it's harmless. It's just kind of like pointless to spend your money on, but it's harmless. But in some cases, sometimes banned substances can end up in there and you don't know. Based on what's on the label, you think, oh, this is perfectly fine. But then you get randomly drug tested. However often that happens, I've yet to see it happen to anyone like close to me. But if that happened to you and there happened to be something in there that was a banned substance, that could potentially be really bad. Not to mention, you want to be confident in what you're putting in your body. So the biggest recommendation I can give is look for something that's NSF certified for sport. I believe Informed Choice is also another third-party certification. And this goes not just for protein powder, but for any of the other supplements I was talking about. Make sure you get something that's NSF certified, because that's going to put you in a position where you know what's going in your body, so you can be sure it's good for you, and you don't run the risk of getting popped for a banned substance you didn't even need to take. And as far as brands I like to recommend, I personally use Garden of Life, their plant-based powder. It's because, like I was saying, dairy doesn't really do well with me, so I find it works better for me. Now, for athletes that I would recommend whey protein, Garden of Life also has a whey protein. It is NSF certified for sports, so that could be an option. I believe PJF, Paul came out with a protein powder brand as well. I'm not sure I think there's this third party tested, but I don't think it's NSF certified for sports. So just be aware of that. But I would assume if Paul is backing it, it's probably a good product. And then there's another one called Live Momentous, which is also NSF certified, but it's absurdly expensive. Like I would go with the different ones because it's like $70 for a regular size thing of protein powder. I'm just like, what? Like that's a little much. Yeah. Like 30, 40 is like, okay, like you get what you pay for, but 70 is just like, bro, like who's going to buy that? But if you're feeling fancy, that could be an option for you. I'm trying to think. There's another brand that is on the tip of my tongue, but between those, that should put you in a pretty good spot, though.
Yeah, I'm somewhat of a brand ambassador for Orgain. So
okay. Yeah.
Which is you also used Garden of Life too. So I was just trying them out, and then I kind of like Orgain, and I looked, I did my research. So
yeah,
and the most important thing is it sits well with my body. Like that's the other thing. Like you said, you do have to try things to make sure they sit well. Like
yeah.
I don't know. I haven't did a test to see if I'm lactose intolerant, but I know with whey, it has that dairy aspect in it. And then when I usually take whey, stuff with whey in it, it doesn't sit well with my stomach at all.
Yeah, and that's something important too, because a lot of people do that and they just think like, oh, that's normal. But if you're taking something or eating something and you don't feel right after, it's probably a sign you should pay attention to.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. Now, I guess I don't know if I have any more questions. I mean, you answered pretty much anything. Like maybe, what's one of the biggest things that you see amongst the athletes you work with that should be known in terms of just general knowledge for every athlete or somebody who's trying to make a change?
You cut out there a little bit at the last second, but you were just saying what should athletes know, like in general.
What is like general knowledge?
Yeah.
In terms of something you want, like that all athletes should know in terms of just making sure if they want to make a change in nutrition, that they need to cover.
The biggest thing with nutrition is to make sure that your nutrition plan is actually in alignment with the goal you're trying to achieve. Like a lot of people think that nutrition is just quote unquote eating healthy. And that's a great start. So if you're going from eating like crap to including some more vegetables in there and eating a little bit quote unquote healthier, that's a great first step. But a lot of people think that's where it stops. And the reality is that in order to actually use nutrition to see a result or like to help you achieve a certain result, whether it be gain muscle, lose body fat, maximize performance, help with injury recovery, whatever it may be, you have to make sure that what you're doing is actually in alignment. So one of the biggest mistakes I'll see is an athlete coming to me saying, oh, I have, like you're saying, I have dead legs 30 minutes into a workout. I don't know why. I'm eating healthy. Cool. What does eating healthy mean? A lot of times that means a very low calorie intake. And what we talk about, you got to be eating enough calories if you want to perform really well. And vice versa, if someone comes to me saying, I want to lose body fat, but then I look and they're eating 4,000 calories a day and their maintenance calories is technically 3,500, doesn't really match up with what they're trying to achieve. So whether you're trying to achieve fat loss, whether you're trying to achieve muscle gain, or just performing maximally, just make sure your nutrition plan is actually in alignment with those goals. Because again, eating healthy is a good first step, but it doesn't quite cut it when it comes to actually using your nutrition to achieve a desired result. So I think if athletes could figure that out and then from there build a plan that actually is in line with those goals, that'll help save a lot of people a lot of time and frustration. Because I know I've been there, and a lot of athletes I've talked to have been there, where they're wondering, I'm eating healthy, but just nothing's happening. A lot of times that's the case.
All right, I got one last question, and then I got a couple of little quick fun questions to ask.
For sure.
So, and then I'll let you go. I don't want to hold you up too much longer.
No, you're good. This is fun.
What is your take on fasting?
Yeah, so
some people, some obviously some have to due to religious purposes, but
for sure,
somebody thinking, because I've tried it before, and it's tough, but it's also sometimes the way to detox, I guess, from things that I read and tried and whatever. But what is your professional opinion about it? What, I just wanted to touch on this as well.
Yeah, so fasting in the sense of like having a very restricted eating window. Again, my favorite answer, it depends. It depends on the individual, what your goal is, what your schedule is like, what your training demands are. For many athletes, it's going to be tough to follow like a strict like intermittent fasting, like 8-hour eating window or 6-hour eating window type of thing. Because again, what's the most important thing? You got to get your calories in. And if you're cutting down that eating window, it can be tough to get your calories in. And if you're underfueled, that's not going to be a good look. Now, if you're in a situation where fat loss is the goal, fasting isn't magic, but it can be a good tool to help you stick to that calorie deficit. So if you know, okay, I find myself kind of midnight snacking, I don't know what to do. By saying, okay, I'm only going to eat between 12 and 8 p.m., then you put yourself in a position where you kind of eliminate those midnight snacking episodes or like eating late in the evening or whatever, and you lower your calorie intake. So it's not because fasting is necessarily like this magical thing. It's simply because it's a tool that allows you to actually stick to the plan. And like we talked about, sticking to the plan is the most important thing. Now, to an extent, there are some health benefits associated with just quote unquote fasting in general. It doesn't mean you have to like follow it like super strict and like do like 16-8 or whatever the case may be. But like eating in the middle of the night is really not ideal. Even if you are trying to gain muscle, your body is just not meant to try and digest large amounts of food or any food really in the evening. There's other things that your body wants to put energy towards. And when you put food in the system, you kind of divert your body's energy back to the digestive system and take away from other things that it could be focusing on. So in general, and it also messes with your body's internal clock, your circadian rhythm, which kind of influences your sleep quality and stuff like that. So overall, I'm not a huge fan of like midnight snacks and eating super late in the evening or right before bed. Again, in some cases, eating close to bedtime may be necessary. Like if you have a late workout, I'm not going to tell you to skip your meal. Like that's not something you want to do. Make sure you get a meal in. But if you have the freedom to not eating later in the evening, it's typically a good idea. Again, not because you see this a lot, people saying, oh, if you eat after 7 p.m., it's carbs just turn into body fat and you're just going to gain fat. That's not true. But again, I wouldn't go out of my way to recommend eating later in the evening. But just back to the topic of fasting, it can be a helpful tool. And I think everyone would benefit from, or most people, there's always exceptions to the rule, but most people would probably benefit from quote unquote fasting about 12 hours a day, which if you think about it, really it's not even really fasting. It's just don't eat a couple hours before bed, maybe wait an hour after you wake up to have breakfast, and there you go. But again, there are some exceptions to that. It comes down to the individual athlete. But overall, that would be my view on fasting. Would I recommend going on a 16-hour fast or 18-hour fast or like a very restricted eating window? Probably not for most like high-performing athletes. It can be total, like for you, for example, if you're not really focused heavily on maximizing athletic performance and you have a crazy training schedule and that just works with your schedule and you find like you enjoy it and you feel good, then by all means go ahead. But for an athlete who needs to eat 5,000 calories or 4,500 calories in a day to maintain 2 a days or 3 a days, fasting will probably be tough. So, well, kind of summarizing that long-winded answer into a very concise statement, it's going to depend on the athlete and individual goals.
I mean, hey, that's why I brought you on, because you have all this knowledge to just share. That's, so you can go as long-winded as you want or short-winded. To be honest, like I'm going to actually go back and watch this interview because there's a lot of information that I want to write down.
Awesome.
And it's great. But so we'll do a quick speed round.
For sure.
Random questions that, like I said, a little light, and then we'll close off, and I'll give you a chance to kind of, talk about, or, give your website, your IG handle and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But, all right. So first one, what's your favorite go-to meal?
Go-to meal will probably be, let's see, chicken thighs, white rice, squash, and arugula. That's pretty consistent in my diet. Simple, gets the job done. You got the protein, carbohydrates, color. That's usually my go-to.
Favorite basketball player?
Kobe, hands down.
What would be what's a dream job besides what you're doing right now?
Damn, that's besides what I'm doing right now. I don't know. This is super cheesy, but like this is the dream job, man. What are you saying? But I don't know. NBA player.
There you go. See, like, yeah, for me, when I ask that question, a lot of people get stumped with that. I said, I love music, so I said I would be a musical performer.
I think being like one of those like esports athletes would be pretty dope. Like we just play video games all day.
Yeah.
And like make money doing that. Like that'd be sick.
Yeah, for sure, man. But so here's my last one.
Yeah.
This can be a little bit longer. If you had a chance to talk to your younger self, what kind of advice would you give him?
Damn, that's deep. Let's see.
I asked this I haven't asked this to all my guests, but I've asked it to a decent amount of them. So
yeah, this is kind of just me talking to me right now too, but like just be patient. Like I think I'm very, very impatient, which it honestly worked to my advantage to an extent because it's put me in the position where I've been able to work with pro athletes and do this at a very, like I'm 20. So it's been an advantage of mine, but also it can be kind of detrimental because at times it gets to be like a negative thing where I'm like rushing myself and feeling like I have to do this or have to do that. And I think if I could understand then actually apply that would help a ton. So I think for any younger guys listening out there, younger girls listening out there, like just be patient. I think that's the biggest thing. Like be patient, but don't stop working hard in the short term. I think people hear patience and think, oh, I'm just going to be lazy and it's just going to come to me. Like, no, like keep working, but keep the long game in mind. Like, don't rush it.
Sure. No, that's huge. Like, I can say I'm the same. I was the same thing. Like in terms of just being patient, knowing your time is going to come. Just you have to keep working towards the goal.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's going to happen if you're taking the right steps. It's like you plan your nutrition plan and you stick to it, you'll get the results. But that's just like everything in life, right? You're gonna get
for sure.
Things, obviously, you might find a food that doesn't sit well with you, but you got to make an adjustment.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, related to life and whatnot. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, but yeah, so no, bro, appreciate you coming on to the podcast. It really means a lot. And after this, obviously, I want to be able to chat a little bit, but like let the people know your IG and then your website.
Yeah, so I mean, the best place to find me is probably on Instagram. I'm most active on there at T Clark Nutrition. I'm also on, I think at this point, pretty much any social media platform. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, just Tommy Clark. I'm on TikTok too. I haven't used that in a minute, but it's T Clark. And actually, it's Basketball Nutritionist on TikTok if you want to hunt me down on there. But really, the best place to find me would probably be Instagram. And then as far as the website, I would recommend going. I actually put together like a little like 3-minute quiz to help athletes kind of figure out where they're messing up with their nutrition. So the URL for that is hoopsquiz.com. And that's, like I said, it's a 3-minute quiz. You take it, it kind of helps to pinpoint like what your biggest diet and training mistake is. And then based on the result of that, it'll send you a free 3-day video series taking you through like some of the first steps to actually fix whatever your mistake you're making. So for example, if you take it and you find out, oh shoot, I'm dehydrated all the time, you'll get a couple of videos going over how to actually fix that, the importance of it, and just making sure you're going in the right direction. So if you're looking for a place to start for free on the nutrition side of things, that would be a great place to go. So that's hoopsquiz.com. And then the best place to find me, reach out to me, ask me questions, would be IG at T Clark Nutrition.
All right, man. Thank you very much. All right, guys. Please, thank you for listening. And I ask you to comment, you know, either comment, leave questions, whatever. You know, it mean a lot to us. I'll bring him on again. This was a really good episode. And, you know, from there, just, you know, keep grinding, guys. Chase your dreams. Find your passions and what makes you happy. So keep grinding. Let's get it. No days off.